You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. And as a prompt for our conversation segment, which is on implementing single Africa market, there is a background report by Dennis Adegunloye.
In 2018, African heads of state signed an agreement that would bring to life the African Continental Free Trade Area. Considered to be a game changer in African regional and international trade, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, after several delays, came into force on January 1st, 2021. It is set to become the world's biggest trade deal in terms of participating countries since the establishment of the World Trade Organization in 1994. African economies traditionally lack capacity to be globally competitive, but this pursuit and achievement of market integration is bringing together the continent's 1.3 billion people. The human resource alone, experts believe, could create an economic bloc with a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion. The agreement is also expected to enhance competitiveness and stimulate investment, innovation, and economic growth by increasing efficiency and eliminating trade barriers, including the removal of tariffs on about 90% of goods. With the African Continental Free Trade Agreement now in motion, intra-African trade is expected to grow by 33%, and Africa's total trade deficit is expected to be cut in half. It is considered not just a simple free trade agreement, but a vehicle for Africa's economic transformation, facilitating movement of persons and labor, competition, investment, and intellectual property. The agreement was due to come into force on July 1st, 2020, but the COVID-19 pandemic led to its postponement. And with COVID-19's impact on world economies, many of which fell into recession, with this agreement, opportunities are believed to exist to speed up economic recoveries with increased intra-African trade, easing the burden created by the pandemic. Experts, however, say that to give the African Continental Free Trade Agreement the best chance of delivering on its potentials, the continent will need help and investment for updating its infrastructure. These issues and more, including the possibility for a single currency, will form the basis of discussions on Good Morning Nigeria shortly.
Welcome back. Now joining us via Zoom to discuss the topic is the Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Otumba Adeni Adebayo. Honorable Minister, Happy New Year and welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Happy New Year and good morning. It's good to be with you this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And also here in the studio, we have one of our regulars, the President, National Association of Nigerian Traders, the erudite trader himself, Dr. Ken Ukoha. Many thanks for joining us and Happy New Year.
Thank you very much and Happy New Year to your Nigerians.
We also have seated in the studio, Comrade Isa Aremu, our regular General Secretary, National Union of Textile, Garment and Tailoring Workers of Nigeria. You're welcome, as usual.
Thank you very much.
Compliments of the season and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Thank you.
Well, compliments of the season, gentlemen. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. Let me just start with the Honorable Minister, Industry, Trade and Investment, Otumba Adeni Adebayo. Congratulations, first of all. There is a trade pact now for all Africans, and of course the barriers across Africa, trade barriers have been broken now. And that got into effect on the 1st of January 2021. We're about 4 days into that now. Before we get deep into discussing this, may we know what the trade and investment sector like is in that Abuja? What's Nigeria's trade and investment sector like in that Abuja? Let's have a background. Let's look back and then see where we were, and then from there we can now move on and then see where we're headed. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much. I listened to the intro to the program and it was very, very comprehensive. It pretty much put everything together and it has given a good background. However, there's like to add to that. Nigeria actually signed into the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement on the 7th of July in 2019. Nigeria was one of the last countries to sign because our President Muhammadu Buhari, was a bit concerned about signing the agreement because he was concerned about how it would affect Nigerian industry. And he undertook a lot of consultation before he finally put pen to paper and agreed to sign the agreement. And even after signing the agreement, he set up the National Action Committee on the agreement, which is chaired by me, and which includes a cross-section of the business and trading community in Nigeria, public and private sector, with the whole idea was to sit down and look at how Nigeria would be affected by the signing of the agreement, and what gains and what benefits would accrue to the country. So Nigeria has done a lot with regards to making sure that there's a lot of protection for Nigerian industry, Nigerian services, with regards to our participation in the African Free Trade Area Agreement. The whole idea, as pointed out in your intro, is the elimination of tariffs on 90% of tradable products. What we are doing in Nigeria is we are looking at where we have comparative advantages. First of all, we have comparative advantages in the trading of our services. Last few years, Nigerian service operators, banks, Nollywood actors, the musicians, lawyers, they've all been complaining about not having an equal playing ground in Africa. This signing of this agreement and its ratification by Nigeria will go a long way to helping our service industries do very well in Africa. It also gives our industry an opportunity to improve on their manufacturing and to trade in Africa. Dr. Ken is there, who is a member of the National Action Committee, and we have discussed on many occasions, especially if you look back and see the problems that Nigerian traders have been having in Ghana. We believe that the signing of this agreement will give us an opportunity to resolve such problems, and will give our traders an opportunity to have a level playing field in other African countries where they will be operating.
Now, why do you place in the trade and investment components of the Nigerian Economic Sustainability Plan in this very equation?
Sorry, I can't hear you clearly.
What I'm saying is, why do you place in the Nigeria's trade and investment component of the Economic Sustainability Plan of this government in this very occasion of the AAF CTFA?
Well, basically, the Economic Sustainability Plan really is to boost the economy of Nigeria as a result of what has happened because of the COVID pandemic. The whole idea of the Economic Sustainability Plan is to put more money in the economy to enable those who have lost as a result of the pandemic to recoup what they have lost. It's the government's attempt to assist people, businessmen, traders, artisans, and to generally boost the economy by putting more money in the economy as a result of what was lost at the pandemic. So the whole idea is that let us stabilize our people and give them an opportunity to be able to compete with other African countries.
Honorable Minister, you know, most African countries' economy varies in size, economic development and diversification, but all of them are facing challenges in job creation, you know, health, security and all that. And with the sustainability plan of the federal government here in Nigeria, how will that help, you know, in sort of bridging the gap between these least developed countries, that's LDCs there, and then a country like Nigeria, which is a big brother in Africa?
The whole idea, you see, for us here, what the African Continental Free Trade Area is doing is that it is creating a big block, a big marketing block. The whole idea is that we should trade amongst ourselves as opposed to trading with foreign countries. We should look at ourselves first. Let us supply goods to other African countries from African countries. So what we're trying to do in Nigeria is that we're trying to improve on our MSMEs. We need to give them a comparative advantage. We need to assist them to be able to roll out the manufacturing of their goods. We need to help them to improve the quality of their goods. We need to help them to create an enabling environment whereby their goods by way of price will be competitive with other African countries, such that we can now move our goods out into these countries. One of the things that the Economic Sustainability Plan has in store for Nigerian manufacturers is a single-digit rate facilities from the banks. We are working hard to put that in place. The central bank has come out with a few schemes whereby they're charging 5% for facilities to assist local manufacturers. So there's a lot going on in that regard. And the whole idea is to give our manufacturers an opportunity to be able to compete effectively. We don't want Nigeria to be the dumping ground because, yes, we have a big market. We have a 200 million market out of a 1.2 billion market in Africa. So we want to take advantage of the 1 billion that is not Nigerian, so that Nigerian goods can flood the African market and bring prosperity to our manufacturers and our people here in Nigeria.
Now, many thanks, Honorable Minister. Gentlemen in the studio, let's look at the AFCTFA and then see where really we stand in Nigeria and, of course, where do Africans stand in the whole economic world. When the barriers are broken, Okoha, let me start with you. The barriers have been broken, and of course you have removal of 90% tariff on goods and services, and you get 1.3 billion people connected, in Africa, across 50 or more countries. That means great, economic interactions and commercial activities will really flourish in Africa now, and that's going to be to the benefit of almost every other trader in Africa. Now, do you see that really playing out successfully, given our different sizes, given our different economic, strength, and given our different manufacturing, if I may come in with that manufacturing strength, and given our inequalities? Because I seem to believe, going by the agreement, that the trade agreement will try to make the unequal equal.
Thank you very much, Yusuf. Once again, good morning, Nigerians. Let's start this way with the knowledge that every trade agreement is negotiated in a win-win principle. So all parties to the agreement, the reason why you negotiate is to ensure that no party in the agreement is left a loser. Mm-hmm. Now, having said that, it does not, however, shield every party. For instance, if a party to that agreement, in this case, a member state, an African country, does not have anything in the basket of her commodities to export, to sell, to distribute, it means you have incapacitated yourself, no matter how that agreement has been couched. The second thing is that in this AFCFTA, there is a game that everybody has come to the party. It is what you put in that you take. It is a quantity that you drop, that you take away as revenue in terms of value addition and all of that. And there are some countries who may not have the capacity or the competence in production of goods, but theirs is on services. That's why the entire negotiation did not only look at trading goods, but also went into trading services. And so, just like the Honorable Minister said, we have sectors, for instance, in Nigeria, even if we are not going to do very, very flamboyantly on trading goods, trading services, we have a lot to capture in that market. Looking at the financial sector, where you see Nigerian banks in almost every country in Africa. Looking at transport sector, looking also at, the video, the communication sector. And by the time you look at this and also come to the facts and the realization that even in terms of trading goods, Nigeria does not only have the market, but also have the production muscle. When I say muscle, we look at West Africa, for instance. I'm saying this now because the Article 5B of the AFCFTA provides that the regional economic communities are going to be the building blocks to the AFCFTA. And if you look at the regional economic communities, which is ECOWAS, one of them is ECOWAS. In fact, the AFCFTA recognizes 8 of them. One of them is ECOWAS. Under ECOWAS, you find out that almost about 67% of the manufacturing sector capacity belongs to Nigeria. Of course, we know that in-house we are, having some issues with some sectors like textiles, and where importation, unwholesome importation, has almost killed the sector. Like furniture, where our capacity is there, but then if you look at the importation also, and then our test for foreign goods, these have also helped to, dissuade. I'm not saying destroy it, dissuade the sector from growth. But then, if you look at the real manufacturing in totality, you see that we have a muscle to compete. South Africa, people talk about South Africa, oh yes.
I'm not cutting you short, Ukwa, here.
Yes.
When you mention the muscle of Nigeria in manufacturing and the rest of them, you also should try to understand the fact that manufacturing in Nigeria has not been thriving so much, given the impediments to that. Power, for instance, the environment and things like that. So much so that other countries bringing goods that may really affect our business here in the sense of pricing and profit sharing in that regard.
Unfortunately, in trade, you do not look at it from that particular prism alone. You also look at it when you are competing. You also look at it, of course, what you said is correct. You also look at it from potentials. Now, let me explain the potentials.
All right.
If you look at the manufacturing sector, look at Aba, look at Onitsha, look at Lagos, look at Kano, look at, first of all, you look at what is, that's one. Two, you look at the capacity of that agreement that you have signed to also draw investors into your domain. And of course, you also look at the potential, enterprise capacity of your people. Nigerians are enterprising. Nigerians can design. Nigerians can, produce. You also look at that. Can we begin an agreement that will generate enterprise, added value on the people? Because one of the themes on the rules of origin on which this trade is going to thrive, the agreement is going to thrive, looks at value addition. Can we also have people who can, the manufacturing sector, who can add value on some products that may not be wholly produced there, but add value on it? And then this is where we also have capacities. And I think that, bearing few things that we need to do, like the ports infrastructure that we need to, put in place very well, because today, as we speak, honestly, I think we should be looking at how prepared we are in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the people who are the agencies of government who are going to implement this agreement. And then in terms of the future of Nigeria standing very strong in that agreement. And don't forget, every 5 years, this agreement is going to be reviewed in line with Article 28 of the AFCFTA. And so, if it's going to be reviewed, how do we also put up some monitoring mechanisms? Maybe I will talk about this later on in the discussions.
Okay, Dr. Ken, thank you so much for your opening statements there. And let me join Comrade Issa Remo, MNI, Vice President, Africa Industrial Global Union, and member National Institute, Carol Joss. We'll be talking about the AFTA agreement negotiations that brought us to this moment in time when last Friday it was able to get off the ground. But let's look at the process of Nigeria's ratification of the AFTA. What were the drawbacks and gains in the negotiations for Nigeria?
Well, Juma, let me, through you once again, say Happy New Year to all Nigerians. And I think since we are talking about African Continental Trade Agreement, I think we should also say good morning to all Africans.
Yes.
You know, first, I think talking about the African Continental Trade Agreement, I think it raises the issue of memory of history.
Yes.
And I listened to the Honorable Minister Otumba. I think he referred to that, where we are coming from. Don't forget that the vision of the founding fathers of the Organization of African Unity, the old OAU, which metamorphosed to African Union, was actually to have a common market. In fact, Kwame Nkrumah was of blessed memory, you know, the founding president of Ghana. In his famous speech in 1963 in Addis Ababa, he actually called for United States of Africa. Yeah. You know, interestingly, we lay back, Africa lay back, and the Europeans copied us in 1973. Yeah. They signed the Maastricht Treaty, which led to the common market, which laid the foundation for European Union. You know, so better late than never. You know, don't also forget we had the Lagos Plan of 1980, we had the AU Treaty in 1991. You know, of course, the new activism now in Kigali, you know, 2014, when we now got the commitment to get it done. And I think I was following the trend on webinar, the extraordinary African Union meeting that took place, chaired by Cyril Ramaphosa in South Africa, just about 3 weeks ago. I think consummated it. So it's been a long road to common market, and now we're 2-3 days after. I think it has become a reality. And let me congratulate the Honorable Minister Otumba that during his time is witnessing it, and of course the President Muhammadu Buhari too. So it's been quite challenge, and I think it's good that we're into it. You've read my profile. You know, I'm Vice President of Industrial Global Union. Well, of course, I used to be the General Secretary of Textile. Of course, textile is still, you know, under Global Industrial Union, which is made up of 50 million workers worldwide. And on the continent of Africa, we have close to about 2.5 million workers, the industrial workers. So we're highly interested on trade issues. And we believe, you know, we must trade. Africans must trade with themselves. We should not live on aid, you know, handouts, you know, when we can trade in goods and services. But in doing so, we must also be conscious. We must be, in fact, for us, it's conscious optimism. And can you remember, we went through these processes, we were among the people to caution, you know, Nigeria for rushing for ratifying the new agreement, because again, back to memory, don't forget that we've been trading Africans. You forgot the transatlantic trade.
Trans-Saharan trade.
You know, even transatlantic was trading humans. Yes. I mean, that's not the kind of trade we're looking for. Yes. Slavery. Yes. Then later on, we traded with Europe. After, you know, colonialism, they traded with us, but, you know, it underdeveloped us. Now, we must ask the question, and I agree very well, 1.3 billion people, yes, with potential of 2.5 trillion, depending on what figure you are using, dollar market, that's a big one. You know, but we must ask the question, how will the African Continental Trade Agreement further develop Africa, not underdevelop us? And in concrete terms, we must have the derivables. You know, trade should not be the end, it's a means to development. You know, and I think that point must be underscored. Yes, we talk of 1.3 billion market. We talk of what should be generated turnover about $2.5 trillion. But how many jobs will they create for a continent that is facing massive problem of underemployment? I read Cyril Ramaphosa, very upbeat, and I think there should be link between the political leaders driving it and the technical people who also run the show in Accra, we must be able to find out that this new agreement will be able to revive production on the continent of Africa. I listened to Kay very well, and I thought you'd be able to fill in a little bit of gap, which the Honorable Minister also talked about. Take Nigeria, for instance, because this is Africa. I mean, 200 million. You can't do anything than this. Everybody knows. From South Africa to Rwanda, they all know Nigeria is the thing. And that's why they were worried when we didn't come in. Now, but how can Nigeria itself, from day one, we already accept that we're only strong on services, not on goods. Mm-hmm. And for me, the key to trading is the goods. Yes. I'm not too romantic about, I've been to Ghana, I've been to Senegal, I've seen our banks there. Fine, they're there, but you also know the modern banking is digital. What is the job content? What are they financing? It's important because we must also be careful because some of them also finance imports. At times from China, from countries that ideally we need to really copy in terms of their development process. But I think the key thing should be the goods. Now, our concern in the labor movement is that first, the new African Continental Agreement should be able to help us to reindustrialize the continent. Because if you want to trade, you must trade in the goods you produce. And you can't talk of trading goods if you have not produced the goods. This is extremely important. So it will be fine. And I think you raise a point. Maybe this will be awakening to ginger all those production challenges that we have. And this very side that we are talking about is, we led the Regional Economic Committee, ECOWAS, as far back as 1974-45. General Gowon, enthusiastically led that for obvious reasons, because we had goods that we can really take to the region. There was once in Nigeria in which our textile factories, textile production, they produced locally for us and the entire West Africa sub-region. In fact, UNTL in Kaduna has a branch in Ghana, that takes advantage. But as I'm talking to you now, that factory is underproducing. Just on the eve of the new year, it has to engage in redundancy and over avoidable problem, including shortage of cotton, even though I'm not clear about that, because I think that can be, because there has been a lot of new effort now by the federal government under Buhari, under cotton and textile garment policy to revive textile production. CBN intervention has done very well. But to say raw material is not available, that cannot be the way to go. So what I'm trying to say here is that I think in our conversation on the African Continental Trade Agreement, we must be able to find out how those processes, will help us to revive the industry. Take the automobile, for instance. We used to have Peugeot, we used to have Volkswagen, but today I see more made in, forget even made in Japan, I see more made in China product. Not talk of the Tokumbos of different brands.
But we have now.
But that's fine. Those are the potentials that we need to drive. But I'm also excited that in terms of potentials, and that's the point. The biggest refinery project is going on now. I'm talking of Dangote Refinery, with about 650,000 barrels per day production capacity. That will be good outing if it's consummated. So we can trade in real goods in this petroleum product with all the derivatives that go with it. Okay. So I think in our discussion, I want us to be focused on that. Then the last one, which is significant, is that how we live further lift Africans out of poverty. President Buhari is talking of 100 million jobs. So as we are talking of those parameters, 2.5 trillion turnover, 1.3 billion market, this fine, we should be able to say how many jobs too. What is the landmark? And I think African Union is clear about that. Yeah. It's linked to the Agenda 2065, yes. Ken, you remember very well. Yeah. So we must link this to development, to industrialization, to poverty eradication. Otherwise, we've been trading before. Don't forget we went to WTO. In fact, one of the things that destroyed textile industry, another industry, is the uncritical manner in which we went to WTO in 1995 under Abuja. They just signed on without involving the stakeholders, and then we open up our market. We rapidly liberalize, lower the tariff, and at point smugglers also jump the fence. And today we can't recover. So I think as we are continuing the conversation, we must have this focus, have an eye on the ball. It's about development, because we've been trading, but trading has been underdeveloping us before. This should danger us. And now I'm optimistic that because it's our own.
This should be a different approach anyway.
Yeah, it should be.
I can see from here in the studio that there are two sides of the same coin. One is on the services issue and the other one is on the goods
production.
Issue.
Yeah,
and of course you can see when the two can match together, we'll be able to get somewhere. Really.
But the strength lies in goods in particular.
For sure.
And he knows as a trader, he trades more in goods.
Yeah, without goods you can't trade.
I mean, services really. It's okay. There will be service. In fact, those who provide services know that they can only service goods produce.
That's good. Now let's get across to the Honorable Minister and then get his views about, the issues raised by Comrade Aremu here. It's important that really countries have or improve their capacity to manufacture and produce goods, not really heavily depend on services being provided. Nigeria is already market for any other country or any other bloc or trading bloc, if you like, across the world because of our size, our population, the hugeness of our market. Unfortunately, we may not rely on that for purchases and services. Really, the goods issue, the manufacturing sector has to come into this in order to ensure that we really deliver on export rather than import. Now, Honorable Minister, let me just hit it straight. What's the government policy on manufacturing that will maybe make some headway in this regard as we try to compete in Africa?
Thank you very much. Well, the pandemic has shown us, the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us in Nigeria that we cannot rely on oil as our only source of foreign exchange. So we have looked at the manufacturing sector, and also we have looked at it from the point of view of employment of our people. As you are aware, the President has promised that we will do everything possible that it is his intention to take 100 billion Nigerians out of poverty over the next 10 years. And the only way that this can be done is for us to be able to employ our people. We have created an audacious target of doubling Nigeria's export trade by 2030 through AFTA. We believe that by 2030 we should be able to raise the equivalent of $50 billion per annum through our exports. And our strategy is focused on defining how we can achieve that target. And we believe that it is also clear to us that this growth can only come from agriculture, manufacturing, and services. With regards to manufacturing, we are doing a lot to improve the infrastructure for manufacturing in Nigeria. The Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment is discussing with many of the state governments at the moment with the industrial parks. We are also looking at putting the proper infrastructure in place. For instance, at the moment, we are about to take to council memos for putting in IPPs in Calabar and Kano free trade zones. The whole idea is for us to have the proper infrastructure in place so that people can just come in, set up their industry, and know that all infrastructure necessary for their operations are in place. We want to do this in as many states as possible so that people will have access to proper infrastructure for their industry. And the reason we're doing this is that government has to work with the private sector. It's government's job to put in place an enabling environment which will make the private sector come and invest and make them competitive with the other African countries. The Brookings Institute has already projected that over the next 5 years, that $1 trillion can be generated through manufacturing in Africa, and that will create 14 million jobs. Nigeria is working hard to be able to take advantage of these figures so that we can take our people, we can get jobs for our people, we can create employment for our people, and we can make money for the country in the process as well. Thank you.
Ministers, after advances and becomes more consolidated, and there are so many initiatives out there. We cannot do this without the private sector, but we need to understand that do we really have a national monitoring mechanism that will properly appraise our fortunes in the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement?
That is what set up the National Action Committee, which I mentioned earlier, which I chair. It is composed of both members of the public and private sector, and the whole idea is that once now that the agreement has gone into play, they will sit down and appraise what is going on with a view to see what needs to be done if we are together and work out how we can get advantages. The whole idea, I believe President Buhari has been very, very cautious. He's been very, very careful in his approach to our participation in this agreement, because he has said it times without number that he must protect Nigerian industry. If it is not going to be to the advantage of Nigerian industry, we will not participate. And that is why Nigeria was one of the last countries to sign the agreement, and we did not ratify the agreement until the 5th of December last year. I think we were the 34th country to ratify the agreement. And this is because we have been very cautious in our approach. Our Nigerian industries to be at a disadvantage. We don't want Nigeria to be a dumping ground for other African countries. We are cautious of the rules of origin. We don't want Western or Asian countries to use African countries as a staging ground to export goods to Nigeria. So we've taken cognizance of all these things. The National Action Committee has been very effective. It has worked very that we are at an advantage and not a disadvantage.
Well, many thanks, Honorable Minister. Dr. Ken Okoha, let's look at some issues raised by the minister there and then add up to the manufacturing thing. I'm very much concerned about that. Just like Issa Aremu said, as a trader, you'll be very much interested in goods in order to buy and sell and then make profit and then improve the economy. But when you look at the environment in Nigeria, I still want to hammer on that. Take the issue of power, for instance. Power in Nigeria it's a hot cake. We must admit that, because it's not really enough. And most manufacturing or industries, most manufacturers or industries are relying heavily on alternative power than the national grid. And that goes to say that producing anything in Nigeria means spending much more money. The labor is there, the manpower is there, and most of the time the raw materials are there. But when you look at the other components of production, you find out that it's really on the negative side. Do you see us really taking advantage of this, the government taking advantage of this inadequacy in order to improve on the situation and then make production a little bit easier for Nigerian manufacturers, so that traders like you can really have, goods to really compete with across Africa?
Thank you very much. Maybe I should, at this point, say that nobody is saying that as Nigeria, we only have capacity in services. No. In fact, if there is any sector we have capacity on the AFCFTA, it is manufacturing, it is goods.
Okoha, you look at,
and I will explain it.
200 million really is
I'm going to explain this.
So everything is inside there.
I'm going to explain this to you. For some of us who have had the privilege of sitting at the negotiation table, one of the things that we discover is that even other African countries are afraid of Nigeria. In terms of manufacturing in goods, why the discussions of goods are ongoing, they are afraid of Nigeria because they know that there is no country where you get to in Africa that you don't find Nigerian goods. That's very honest. And I tell you this, even in terms of the people, we have done an analysis. About 67% of those who are transacting those businesses, moving goods from one point to another in the whole markets in Africa, markets, in Africa, 67% of them are Nigerians. In fact, 67.1 to be specific are Nigerians. Because there's no market where you go to in Africa that you don't find Nigerian traders.
In the world?
In the whole world. In fact, we are talking about Africa now. So that tells you what? That we can, even with whatever disadvantage we have in terms of infrastructure, the power thing you have raised, the post infrastructure you have raised, these are things that are ongoing, processes that we can also deal with. Even in the midst of all of those impediments, we can still compete. And I can tell you this too, for free, that before Nigeria decided to sign onto the AFCFTA, you recall that we insisted that there should be an impact analysis, and that was done. In fact, if you take a look at that impact analysis, it really showed where we stand. And that was exactly what gave us all the buffer to go into this agreement. Why? Because we discovered that we were crying before, quite all right. But when you look at the impact and readiness, it wasn't the way it was. It wasn't all negative. In fact, Nigeria had a lot of advantages moving in, both in trade, in goods, and also in services, and the other sectors. The AFCFTA in its Article 4 looks at the objectives. And one of the objectives is industrialization, just like my colleague Conrad said. It's industrialization of Africa. And one thing that you take away there is that out of the 15 objectives, the 8 general objectives and the 7 specific objectives, if you take a look at this, one of the things that come into play is the capacity, building capacity of the people, removing them from poverty, creating jobs. And that's one thing that also speaks to some of us, that you are creating jobs. It's very important. How many jobs? I think what we need to do right now, and I want to take it off from where the honorable minister stopped, is to now come up with a template. First of all, a baseline of where we are right now before 1st of January 2021. A baseline data on where we are in terms of employment, in terms of trade, in terms of manufacturing, where we are. And then, when I come with a template, a monitoring template that gives you all the factors and indices to say, yes, from this time to 1 year, this is what has happened in the AFCFTA implementation. This is where Nigeria has moved. This is what has happened in this direction. Then that template will also look at, issues that the terms of reference will be set there in terms of monitoring. You clear terms of reference will now be set, and then that monitoring instrument will now be laced with what I call comparison factor, which means that you compare yourself with where you are before in terms of evaluation, where you were before and where you are right now. Compare yourself also where you are and where other countries are. And then the fourth aspect is setting up a surveillance mechanism. What do I mean? That surveillance means that you are also looking into other countries. What are they doing? Third-party countries, for instance, who are not among the 55 member countries of Africa. What are their roles in the AFCFTA, in African trade? For instance, there are some of them that would be trying to move their goods using some of these countries, transshipment, trans-trade over there. How are you going to track them, monitor that space? What is happening at the WTO? This is how we are going to step it. But before I stop on this front, this brings me to the subject of the National Assembly. And this is one sad area, very unfortunate area I must comment on. We have the feeling that in line with Section 89 of the Constitution as amended, the 1990 Constitution, which talks about oversight, and then Section 12 of the Constitution, which talks about ratification, which says that no agreement, international agreement, will come into force unless it is ratified by the National Assembly. Now, if you take the combination of this reading, I begin to wonder the role of the National Assembly in the whole discourse of the AFCFTA. I've not seen this manifest. I've not seen the National Assembly that have come to interrogate what we have negotiated, interrogate what are going to be the benefits, interrogate what is the linkage between our extant laws and the AFCFTA. Are they conformed? Are they in conformity? Are there laws that we need to make to push AFCFTA, to make them benefit, to make Nigeria benefit them more? These are areas that I didn't see that. And I thought that we should have a National Assembly that ought to have, before the implementation took off, have really stood and asked a lot of questions. Don't forget that they are the ones that ought to have, in fact, I stand to be corrected, ought to have ratified the agreement. Courtesy of that, section. I have not seen that. It presupposes that they ought to know the contents of what has been negotiated. I am not sure they know.
Okay.
That's why we have this issue.
Dr. Ken, let me now throw that question at the Honorable Minister. If you can.
I'm not sure the Honorable Minister is going to be the one. He is not a member of National Assembly.
Okay, let's talk about the legal implication of the AFTA and the major challenges facing the implementation of the trade agreement, which Dr. Ken Okoa sort of raised some pertinent questions here.
We are working on the implementation of the agreement, and we in the National Action Committee, we have 9 pillars which we are working with because we need to ensure that we have adequate legal, operational, institutional, and other arrangements to safeguard our market from unfair trade rules and practices. We must also make sure that they work in practice. So as a result of which, the National Action Committee has put in place 9 pillars for the implementation. We are already progressing on them, and I'll just go through the list which I have before me here. We are growing our production and service capacity. We are updating our policies, regulations, and laws. We are improving our trade logistics and power infrastructure. We are consolidating our trade facilitation and ease of doing business programs. We are upgrading our quality infrastructure. We are actively driving the expansion of Nigerian businesses into select African markets. We are growing our skill base and human capacity. We are enforcing our borders and ensuring seamless coordination among agencies of government, between government and private sector, and between Nigerian government and business community and their counterparts in Africa. So you see, all the issues that you have raised are things that we are looking at and that we are working towards to make sure that Nigeria has the advantage that is required. We are aware of the fact that Nigeria has the largest economy in Africa, and we are an import-dependent country. As a result, that makes us a target. So to minimize the effect of being targeted, we are going out and we are being aggressive ourselves. We need to grow our economy. We need to improve on the export of our goods as a result of the fact that we cannot be dependent on the export of oil. Like I said earlier, one of the things that our ministry is doing is that we are going to create more industrial zones, industrial estates, industrial parks in conjunction with the state governments. We are going to make sure that these industrial parks have the infrastructure required, power, water, roads, all these infrastructure that will give our industries that operate from there a comparative advantage over and above it. On the where we have comparative, especially in the we have the policy.
Seem to have lost the Zoom network there, but I believe the minister will be back to answer that question. We'll take a break right now. When we return, our conversation continues. You're welcome back, and this is Good Morning Nigeria. Before our conversation continues, we have a number of tweets that came in. Let's read it out so that our guests will be able to respond. I begin with Festus Akimboyewa. He says, African leaders must be commended for working together to create a comprehensive African market. The AfTA should bring about reduction in tariffs, stimulate production and trade, and boost the economy of the continent. Other trading blocs must support and not frustrate the initiative.
Well, Ola Dimeji Morufu says the agreement must be strictly followed to benefit member states.
And Nokombu Poultry and Agro-Allied Company tweets, please, how does this benefit the small and medium-scale entrepreneur?
Let's not go beyond that. It's a question.
Yes,
could you please respond to that?
That's what?
It says, please, how does this benefit the small and medium-scale entrepreneur? Looking at the AFCTA, this agreement itself. Initially, I was about to get going with the question of how does the common man come into this? But now it has come from a Nigerian, and it's from a power factory, agro-allied company.
Yes, I think you will respond to that.
Does this benefit the small and medium-scale entrepreneurs?
Yes, when we finish the tweets, just keep it in mind. And Akoge tweets, is Africa ready for this free trade or based on few African billionaire businessmen? How will this benefit small businesses? Most African countries don't respect laws and regulations.
Dele Jackson on paper, says on paper, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement has the potential to lift 30 million people out of extreme poverty. But achieving its full potential will depend on putting in place significant policy reforms and the trade facilitation measures. Let all concerned stakeholders do the work to make this a reality. Again, Festus Akimboyewa says, for Nigeria to reap maximum benefits from the African single market, governments must address our weak manufacturing sector, weak productivity, and the chaos in our ports. Government must also ensure Nigeria does not become a dumping ground for substandard goods, which will hurt our local businesses. Sure. Mutana Farouk says the free trade area will certainly cement the trade bloc on the continent if it is well managed. If government fails to seize this opportunity to fortify the MSMEs to compete with their counterparts within the continent, there would be a huge loss of opportunity, although I trust Dangote and others. Yunusa Idris tweets, African Continental Free Trade Agreement and implementation of the single Africa market without common currency on the continent is just a waste of time and resources. What we want in Africa is good leaders with political will to lift us out of abject poverty. And the African single market, according to Festus Akimboyewa, is exciting, but I'm still not sure if Nigeria is fully ready. And what is the national carrier promised us? There is the Ethiopian Airlines, there is Ghana Airways, there is Morocco Airlines, there is Egyptian Airlines, etc. Why is the Nigerian national airline? And Dele Jack Solomon tweets, creating a continental-wide market will require a determined effort to reduce all trade costs. The gains after will require major efforts by countries to reduce the burden on businesses and traders to cross borders quickly, safely, and with minimal interference by officials. Mohammed Sani Garba says, let the panelists emphasize making availability of power so that production in Nigeria can be fair for us to compete better. And I am Ibrahim Modo Aji tweets, the agreement should rather be channeled towards checkmating the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. The African continent, especially Nigeria and its neighboring countries, needs peace for citizens to travel for economic gains. Peace and security should be topmost priority. Comrade Aremu, let's get going.
From the tweets and the reactions, and I'm even much more excited. And let me congratulate the NTA. Let me appreciate your effort, because if I can recall, it is almost 4th editions that you have carried out on the African Continental Trade Agreement. And I think we need to put these issues on the burner, on the agenda. Ken talks of the role of the National Assembly, very, very critical. But I even want to say that it's the role of all of us as Africans. When I read the newspaper, I listened to your newspaper review today. Wait, the real news is not in the papers, with all due apology. Where it's okay, the flash of criminal elements, who make news, bandits who kill around, it's big news, in terms of news. But the real challenge is how to overcome this problem, which can come using the African Continental Agreement for development. 3 days after, I will be happy that we get the facts. What is the trend now? What is the mode of trading? How are we implementing? The point Ken is raising about those data, I think the media have a role to play. Then we must continuously promote trade literacy. We need to, because it's a complex treaty. All those issues we are raising now, that means that we must keep on educating ourselves. What are the processes, the clauses in the treaty, Article 4 with this with industrialization. And this literacy has to be both vertical and horizontal, because the executive directive must also be well informed, the legislature have to be informed, all of us have to be. Then back to the issue of the small scale enterprises. Even though the challenge of African Continental Great Agreement, Juma, is that we must also think African.
Yes.
I won't talk here making case just for Nigeria. I'm vice president of Global in Africa. And I think the vision of the drafters of African Continental Trade Agreement is that we have to have solidarity cooperation in which you all uplift each other. Where we have comparative advantages, we must trade well. So it's not about big, small. It's about everybody benefiting. In any case, if you leave some people behind, if you some countries behind, they will still overrun you with the crisis of survival and poverty. So, but this will benefit a lot of small-scale enterprises more. And I think Ken will know better. When he talks passionately about Nigerians who are valuable everywhere in Africa. These are small small medium enterprises, people who are trading, and also, but the question again comes to what are they trading in? Are they trading goods produced by Africans? I think those are the critical issues. Because I've seen Nigerian traders everywhere, African traders everywhere, second-hand goods, imported, recycled goods, and that's why the rule of origin will be very, very critical. This is the time we must monitor. Africans must produce what we consume what we produce. And when you talk of small-scale, small enterprise, that's where the women are.
Yes.
Cyril Ramaphosa in his address on the 5th of February was so passionate that this is the time to get women to be involved in trading, in development. But the government has to do the side of the bargain. So even if we produce, as many of our women are producing, whether it's, again, I'm from textiles, so I can talk about Kampala, beautiful clothes we put on, caps, all those things we produce, fantastic,
That's
very
beautiful.
good one. Even the personal, protective equipment, in the condition of COVID, there are a lot of creative effort to produce face masks. Now, who buys that product? And this is why government will use public procurement to facilitate trade and encourage our producer. What am I talking about? That is that Nigeria has 13.5, I hope I get it right, trillion naira budget this year, which is quite significant, even though budget per capita, Juma, we are one of the poorest. Yeah. You are poorer than Ghana. We are poorer than South Africa. Budget per capita, I calculated, it was about $102. That's all. If we share the money, that's all we are going to, everybody, that's what we are going to use to survive in a year. South Africa is talking about $5,000 per capita. So even purchasing power, and Ken, you have to be careful. This is our romantic view of our size. What does it mean? Who buys? Only those who have pocket can buy. Only those who have jobs. South Africa has more possible, in quality terms, because purchasing power, they also produce goods more. I'm serious, manufactured goods. If you look at manufacturing value added, cars are produced there. In fact, some of the Toyotas and Co we are using now, they are now from South Africa. They are not even from Japan again. They relocated their Nissan. This is why Innocent must be encouraged. Pujo must come back.
Beautiful.
Am I communicating?
Beautiful.
And even South Africa, they say if they have the capacity, they come and produce there. It doesn't matter. Capital will be here. Jobs will be created. So
we need to make sure this budget, as small as it is, turns Africa round, so that you don't use the same budget to go and procure from Europe and America. And I'm serious about this, because Britain just got out of EU with all the chaos, immense.
Still with some grey areas.
Yeah, if it were to be Nigeria, they were Africa, they will say we are failed state, but nobody said Britain is failed. Look at the chaotic manner. I watched the scenes, look at the queue, the borders, which is, well, but that's their cup of tea. Yeah. But what I'm saying here is that, because the exit means that they are looking forward to Africa. And Ken, I listen to you, how Britain has now gotten, is it Cote d'Ivoire, one of the Francophone countries, to have a deal with them under the...
Including Ghana.
Economic, partnership agreement. So they're undermining us. So we must wake up. For me, so what I'm saying is that this is a big thing. And I think your future outing, my recommendation is that you must bring the assembly here. It's important. Because they must do public oversight. Then not only that, we must not be insular. If you bring South African ambassador here, bring Cote d'Ivoire, bring Ghana, put those questions. How can you sign on to African Continental Agreement when you are doing different deals with Europe?
Beautiful.
We have to, this is the time to relate. That would be the way to offer leadership. Because if you don't do so, they are doing so.
Absolutely.
South Africa has been on our neck. I can raise this, but there are a lot of colleagues. They want to find out what is the thinking, what are we doing. So we must also be strategic of that. Then the last one, when we talk of small-scale enterprise, small and medium, that's about labor. It's about human beings. Can you agree with me? This so-called xenophobic attack, it's not against big businesses. Nobody will attack Dangote. Even Ken is too big to be attacked in South Africa. But it is small people.
Yeah.
You get it? So as we are talking of movement of goods and services, what of movement of labor? Who protects us? Who protects working people and women? They don't have the right of citizenship. The other day I was in Accra and I was embarrassed. The custom guy was asking me, how long am I staying? I said, wait. You asking me how long am I staying in my country? Then he laughed. I said, well, even looking at me, look, I look more Ghanaian than you. Yes. Then he said, no, but I think he was shocked because I knew my rights.
Exactly.
Yes. Then by the time he said, no, but what he's saying is, my friend, you can ask me how long I'm staying in my own country. Ghana is my country.
Exactly.
I'm Africa, I'm West Africa. So quickly say, yes, sir. He dropped my passport. But how many people can do those assertions? So
and
we
how
need
many
to,
people know
what is the right? Yes. That's why we need that literacy. So what I'm saying here is that we must protect, because you see, the small scale, small medium enterprise cannot move the way the Boas will move, the Dangotes will move, the groups in South Africa, the big businesses. Yeah. So that we don't also make this trade agreement to privilege big businesses at the expense of the small. This trade agreement should redistribute wealth, should stop the income gap, business gap, and that means that small people should move freely. Even working people. I also know some workers who can work on account of the fact that they are not from the same countries. So again, we need a clause on that. And I think Nigeria must also play, which is not the case here, because Nigeria doesn't even do quality check. Wait, you talk of South African Airways. I think some people are mentioning something. Excellent point. Ethiopia Airline. It comes here every day. Let me trouble you on that. Have you ever observed it? No single Nigerian is an attendant on the Ethiopia Airline.
No.
Meanwhile, you may not see single Ethiopian flying because they can't even buy ticket. Now, what is the job content? So under liberalizing services, you are just fueling, creating jobs elsewhere. We are not. So somebody has to do the check. Quality control. I will get what I'm saying. Not, in fact, quantity control. Quantity in terms of jobs. So you can, and there should be reciprocity. That's why I'm happy about Air Peace. Wonderful job is doing. Alania just launched the Joburg route, which is quite, for me, remarkable. Because Nigerians have been traveling a lot, yet we pay for airline that is not our own. And if Rwanda can have an airline, and possibly get your pilots to drive it, and then these passengers, they collect the money. I think this is a rude awakening. So what I'm saying in summary is that the real news headline I want to hear subsequently now should be about this big opportunity to reinvent production in Nigeria, to reinvent proper trading. I've been to ShopRite. I don't know whether they're still around to see.
They're still around.
Look at the 3/4 of the goods here. Are they made in Nigeria?
Yeah.
South Africa. So they brought no capital at all. Yeah. You give them land, they flood the place with your goods. In fact, they even go to your market to get the yam and sell there, and then they have the rate of return, we must be on duty. And let me tell you the last note, the role of Nigeria is not just what can we get. If Nigeria doesn't drive trade, no African country can drive it. Because we are the real, and it used to be like that in the 60s, 70s. We have good production capacity. In fact, by now, when we say we are also very cautious not to have gone for this on time, it's because, again, we've got so weakened. If it were to be the 70s, 80s, when Nigeria production capacity is very huge, Nigeria will be the one to quickly sign. And to be number 34 cannot be the best. In fact, I was also not comfortable that secretariat in Ghana, but that's a different, maybe we don't need to keep everything. Because we were supposed to be the secretariat initially. Yes. They wanted to give us. But now because we are not clear, it went to Ghana. So, and this is where the thinking will be. But, of course, Ghana, as I've said, is Nigeria, is Africa.
Nigeria,
but
yes.
we must be there to be on duty. Yes. And that's why the job you are doing, this is not a flash. It has to be continuous process. So, Ken, the same thing, and I think this is where the Trader Association, Nigeria Labour Congress, we would like to partner, Manufacturer Association, we can't leave this alone to government. We must have periodic review. First quarter, second quarter, a year after, we take stock. More so that we have opened the borders now. Yes. We have to know which goods coming. What is the quality? What does it mean for rice production already doing? What do you mean for cotton? For everybody.
Comrade,
so that's a few points I thought I should.
Yes, thank you so much, Comrade. And Mr. Nandaba, we have a question.
Yeah, I really want to, appreciate you for these issues you've raised, and they are great concerns, which I know Ken Ogoha will really talk about them, and most likely the minister too will make some comments about them. The concerns are really many, all right? There are some, countries that are very friendly to Nigeria in terms of trade. You mentioned some, but these are just at the lower level. Don't talk about the big ones. You mentioned Ghana, South Africa, and the rest of them. And you talk about collusion also by African countries, sometimes with foreign countries, in this kind of agreement. You get goods produced somewhere and then get them labeled as if they are African, then they have been brought in. And so many issues like that. How would you react to this in terms of trying to make the free trade agreement very viable and an instrument for development in Africa?
Yeah, I think I would start with the very wonderful outlay that has been presented by Comrade here. In terms of collaborations, the private sector will need to come out very strongly. And I think this is the time we need such handshake now, so as to also hold government accountable on this. Government has negotiated and brought down to us, and we now have to monitor what has been negotiated in terms of its implementation, and to make sure that the benefits of what has been negotiated comes down to us. The second point is looking at what I raised, which has to do with the Parliament, the National Assembly. And I think it's very important for them to understand. Look, for instance, you have apart from the agreement itself, the AFCFTA agreement itself, you have the protocol on trading goods. You have the protocol on trading services. In fact, under the protocol on trading goods alone, you have 9 annexes. Wow. And which are very clear. Annexes on trading, trade barriers, non-tariff barriers, on trade TBT, technical barriers to trade, on safeguards, on rules of origin, on a lot of all of these issues. We need a very clear understanding from the Parliament so that they can also measure and monitor and oversight on them. And the final thing is, coming back to what you have raised, which is the area of the small and medium enterprises and their benefits. That's why some of us are also looking at the content of the agreement. Now, I raised an issue here a few days back on the dispute settlement mechanism of the AFCFTA. With regard to the small-scale actor who is moving his goods from here to Ghana, from Ghana to maybe Brazzaville, and all of that, what is the protection level given to such an individual, such a business character, in terms of if he has a problem, where does he cry to? On what shoulder does he cry to? Does he come back, leave the goods there, come back to Nigeria to report? Resolution. And this, the subject of dispute resolution, the mechanism there must be very clear, giving him a window to assess that body, so that all disputes can be resolved, and therefore we have, at the end of the day, win-win situation. Trade negotiations are not done for government. They are for business actors. They are for the manufacturing sector. They are for the trade sector. They are for the transporters themselves as well, who are moving the goods from one place. They are even for the freight forwarders, who are supposed to be, clearing those goods. But then the other side of it will now be the preparedness, the level of preparedness of our institutions, who are going to man, who are going to implement the customs, for instance. The immigration officer, he has given you an instance of, custom, talking about asking him in Ghana, how many days he's going to stay. They need to understand the content of the agreement, that this thing says, look, you need to have 90 days or so. They need to understand this. They need to understand that you are an African, therefore, courtesy of this agreement, you have to. On the other part, we also need to sign up to certain agreements. For instance, Nigeria has not signed the free movement, protocol of Africa, free movement protocol. And I think we need to look at all of this. And that's where I also look at the National Assembly. It's not as if I'm saying that the executive has been the best. No. The executive has a limit to what it is going to do. And there's division of labor in terms of what the executive should do. The executive have done quite a lot, taking us to this point where we are. The National Assembly, I am not seeing. I am knocking at their doors. They have to come up so that there will be that collaboration will give us exactly what we need. I am thinking that the National Assembly, people are talking about what is happening at the ports right now. Chaotic situation in the ports. Before you clear goods now, I think I need to say it here. Before you clear your goods at the port there, one container, you must pay almost about 1.5 million for the container. It doesn't stop there. It doesn't. Don't wait. It doesn't stop there. From there, right there, as you have cleared the goods to the gate, you are paying another 150,000 naira. From that point to the road there, you are paying another 40,000 naira and another 400,000 again. And all of these things, how do you make progress and benefit from the ANC? These are obstacles. How do we stand firm and remove some of these obstacles so that even in terms of our export of goods, we are not going to, be hitting on our own feet? That's my worry. Thank you.
Well, many thanks,
yes,
Dr.
thank you.
Kenukuwa.
Let's now go to the Honorable Minister, where I would like his closing comments on the after implementation. And we left something out of this discussion, which is security. All this will not be possible without security. Briefly, can we have your closing comments on that? It's like it's frozen. The Honorable Minister is there. So now we just have to thank the Honorable Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Otumba Adeni Adebayo, for his comments and input on the African Free Trade Agreement. Thank you so much. Here in the studio, one of our regulars, the President, National Association of Nigerian Traders, the erudite trader himself, Dr. Ken Ukoha. As usual, it's been a pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you very much.
And Comrade Issa Aremu, he's the Vice President, Industrial Global Union and member National Institute, Kuru Jos.
Yes.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, It's a
on
pleasure.
Good Morning
Thanks
Nigeria.
so much. It's a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Well, that's Good Morning Nigeria today. Join us tomorrow for another edition. I am Jumai Yusuf.
And I'm Yusuf Nadab Usman. Do have a great week ahead. Remember to stay safe and be well.